It's about to get ugly. What is up, Flick fans, and welcome back to my channel. I promise I'm getting my microphone back soon, so you're going to have to keep enduring the bad audio for two of the most important videos of the year. But today we are talking about the worst movies of 2018. In my humble opinion, I have already hit on my favorites, my top 10. That video is out. I did honorable mentions. 2018 has been such a cool year for movies. We've gotten so many good movies, a few great films, yet there is always the stinkers, the bad films of the bunch, and I don't mean to get under anyone's skin when I'm doing this video. I'm going to talk some smack about some films. You guys know how it goes, but I do this for fun. It's not like I'm making fun of the filmmakers, the people involved. I'm sure it is very difficult to make a film, but when I'm making a top 10 worst list, I just want you guys to know I'm not going to sit here and be nice. This is my time to let loose and talk about what disappointed me, what made me mad in 2018. And sure, there were a few movies that weren't the best. We're talking about Welcome to Marwen, The Meg, The Predator. Those movies utterly disappointed me, but I wouldn't put them in my top 10 worst because I saw some absolute stinkers this year. I hope you guys enjoy this video. This is all in good faith, all in good fun. My top 10 worst list is always one that I like to sit back, relax, and just have a good time with. I really hope you guys do the same in the comments section below. Let me know what your least favorite movie of the year was. And if you guys want to see my full list from 1 to 174, I have ranked all movies that I have seen this year on Letterboxd. That link is in the description below. Let's get into this list. First, we are talking honorable mentions, the movies that were pretty bad, just not bad enough to make my list. And those movies are Mile 22, The Hurricane Heist, Action Point, The Week of, The Titan, and A Wrinkle in Time. If you've never heard of some of those films, you guys should go check out my Netflix movies ranked videos. There are a lot of movies on Netflix this year that not a lot of people have heard of. I'm not encouraging you to go watch them because they're not good, but those were the bad movies that made my honorable mentions. Now we get into number 10. And I want you guys to know, if there's a movie that's not on here that you thought should have made this list, I did avoid a few of the really bad movies this year. There are certain ones that people are going to expect to be on here that just aren't on here, and if they're not on here and they're that bad, I probably didn't see them. But a movie that I did see is The Possession of Hannah Grace. This film disappointed me on every level, and then the more that I thought about it, the more I was just utterly disappointed with how absolutely boring this movie is. Now, the reason it's number 10 is because I did semi-understand what people were talking about when they were in my comment section telling me, Austin, it's not a bad movie. Well, I can see where you're coming from if you enjoy this style of filmmaking, but for me, The Possession of Hannah Grace fell flat on every level. Uninteresting characters, just a girl wandering around this place for like an hour and 30 minutes, and the movie still, even though it's a short film, it managed to feel way too long. I was just bored out of my mind, and while I was driving home, after thinking about the movie, I'm like, wait a second, this didn't make sense. Why did she have this conversation? This movie's starting to really frustrate me, and that's why it's number 10 on my list. At number 9, I'm not going to talk about this at length because it's already in my worst Netflix movies, but that is Father of the Year. Just an utterly disappointing and uninteresting film from the production company that's brought us plenty of bad Adam Sandler movies, but this time we have David Spade instead of Adam Sandler. Instead of taking advantage of what makes him a very funny actor and what makes him a likable character in certain movies, they give us all of the bad aspects of what he does not do well and does not bring to the screen, and they give us a movie that is completely raunchy, just not in a funny way, just in an uncomfortable way. They focus on this relationship between these two teens that we do not care about, and the entire premise of the movie, these two dads going at it, it's in like 10 minutes of the whole film. Father of the Year is not a movie that I recommend. If you guys ever watch it, please come back to me and tell me how disappointed you were with certain characters. Sure, it could be considered funny, but for me it wasn't. I promise I'll get back to the theatrical releases here in a second, but another movie that you probably haven't seen is The Holiday Calendar, a movie that you should never see is the holiday calendar. This film reminded me of a movie that should have been on Lifetime, but it didn't even take advantage of those Lifetime tropes, those really cliched, heartfelt moments, those cheesy characters. They are here, but they are here in the most utterly annoying way possible. The holiday calendar is so stupid. The relationships between the girl and all of the guys, the guy that clearly loves her and clearly wants to be with her, she is so oblivious the entire film. Her lines of dialogue are absolutely ridiculous. And then, to top it all off, you have this stupid magical calendar that keeps predicting what's going to happen throughout the entire month of December. I don't even remember if it's December. I don't remember anything about this movie. I probably just made all of that up. That's because the holiday calendar is utterly forgettable and utterly annoying. Let's get back to a movie that you may have heard of. I think this is more disappointment than anything, but it's also the fact that I sat cringing and super uncomfortable throughout the entire movie, and the fact that this director is one of the better directors out there, in my opinion, and a guy that I love. Clint Eastwood directed the 1517 to Paris, and this movie was so pointless. Now, sure, it told a great story, a story that needed to be told with people that needed to be recognized as heroes, because these guys are heroes. And I'm not even saying it was the acting, even though the acting was uncomfortably bad. I can't believe Clint Eastwood decided to use the actual people that took part in the event, because he's not an actor's director. He's a director that says cut after the first take, and unless somebody screwed up really bad, he is going to use that first take, and doing that with people that have never acted in their lives is not good. But on top of all that, you have an uninteresting story. They literally go on vacation. They hang out for 30 minutes, meet random characters that never play back into the story, and all of that takes up this chunk of the movie, and it's completely pointless. None of it has to do with what happens later on in the story. The entire movie they're saying, you guys are heroes. You're meant to be heroes. You're meant for something more. And that's true, and they were, but why have dialogue that bad that overshadows what is so important about the end game to this journey? Guys, I really love the story here, and I love the people involved, but the movie that they made about it, I just can't believe how bad this turned out. Thankfully, he had the mule, which wasn't great, but it was a lot better than this. Guys, 1517 to Paris, it's kind of a joke. Y'all knew it was gonna be on here, and here goes the fans of the film that say, Austin, this movie is a romantic masterpiece, and I say this movie is possibly the worst in the franchise that is really, really bad to start with. That is 50 Shades Freed. 50 Shades Freed. You know what? It's not the worst. I think the second one was the worst, but at least the second one didn't have such odd character decisions, like making Dakota Johnson's character this incredible driver who gets in a car chase at one point in the movie, and she's shooting people in the leg, and there are these cartoon-esque villains revolving around this love story that is not a true love story. This is a horrible love story with a horrible man who treats her like garbage, and she just is super oblivious to the fact that he treats her like garbage. And this whole franchise, it just makes me mad, and it makes me even more mad that people like these movies only because the sexual aspect involved. They don't look at the filmmaking. They don't look at how incredibly cringy the acting is. And I'm not even saying Dakota Johnson's a bad actress, because she's not. She was in Bad Times at the El Royale. She was really good in Suspiria this year. She just falls apart in this movie just like everyone else. The directing, the acting, the script, everything that goes into making a film good makes this film bad. And 50 Shades Freed, thank God this franchise is possibly over. They could do more with it easily, but my goodness, guys, this sucks. Up next is a movie that you've probably not watched, and the only reason that I watched is because I heard so many people say, well, this movie's just really dumb, and I watched Show Dogs, and I agree. It's probably the worst movie on this list if we're talking quality-wise, just because it's a film with horrible CGI that feels like it belongs in the late 90s because it looks so bad, it sounds so bad, it feels so bad. Everything about Show Dogs is an absolute disaster, and this movie is horrible, but it didn't affect me in such a negative way, only because this movie is clearly made for kids. And I've seen horrible kids movies before, but guess what? I'm not the target audience. I'm not the person that's really intended to watch this. Show Dog is a movie made for kids. Otherwise, it would probably be #1 on my list, but I'm going to give it a slight pass because I really wasn't supposed to watch this movie. That's no excuse. You should still make a movie that works for adults, that really works for kids, but Show Dogs doesn't do that. It's dumb, horrible acting, horrible voice acting, some of the worst CGI I've seen all year, but it's not #1 on my list because Show Dogs could at least be enjoyed by young, small children, and for some reason I watched it too. Up next, and I promise this is the last Netflix movie on the list, that is The Open House. Talked about this in depth in my worst Netflix video. Not gonna hit on it that hard again. I'm just gonna tell you guys that The Open House probably has the worst ending to a film I've seen in a few years. Everything that happened in this movie, and it was all bad. It was all pointless and annoying, and these characters, there's just no chemistry there between the mother and the son. Everything about it completely comes to a head, and it does not capitalize, and it doesn't just not give you a satisfying ending, it gives you an ending that is so frustrating and annoying, and it's like we sat through this entire movie just for this. If you see The Open House on Netflix, run the other way. Don't just not watch it. Turn the TV off, run out the door, and just keep running. Don't stop, and then when you get to a Wendy's, get me a #3. And next up is a watch that you could consider a fun watch, but I didn't consider it a fun watch because for me it was just more frustrating than it was fun. It was more annoying than it was like, oh, I can enjoy this and have a laugh. It's not supposed to be a comedy too. We're talking Truth or Dare. This film completely blew my mind with how utterly dumb not just the premise was, because yes, the premise could be interesting, but they twisted it in the dumbest way, but the acting was so... This is probably the worst acting of the year, if we're being flat honest. Everyone in this movie was, first of all, way too old for their age. They are so old and they're supposed to be so young, and you could tell you're like, oh. I know movies like Spider-Man Homecoming and 8th Grade completely nail this, and then you have films that come out after those films and they're like, no, we're gonna cast like 27-year-olds as 21-year-olds. I don't know. For being honest, I don't remember how old they are, how young they are. I tried to block this movie out of my mind because watching Truth or Dare just really frustrated me. Honestly, I had a headache when this movie was over just because I was so unimpressed with everything happening. Not even the death scenes were interesting. First of all, a lot of the stuff was spoiled in the trailer, but then you get to what is supposed to be the climactic scenes. Stupid ending where she spreads this thing all around. You want me to spoil it? I don't care. And the last thing I'll say is just the horrible CGI smiling effect. This film could have at least been not as funny if you wouldn't have included that, but I was laughing throughout just because that looked so bad. I'm done with Truth or Dare. Let's move on. Number 2, a film that I just watched, and a film that is completely miserable on every level. I had heard this thing was bad, but I didn't know it was going to be this bad, and that is Slenderman. Slenderman is just the worst horror movie of the year, clearly. Not even close. Everything about Slenderman frustrates fans of horror films, and especially lately, 2018, 2017, both have had really good horror movies, really good movies in the genre that have twisted the genre, but I said this in my Letterboxd review, Slenderman has set horror films back at least a decade. Well, it would have. I think there have been more good than bad, so thankfully they have triumphed, they have overcome how bad Slenderman was. Slenderman makes every single horror mistake that you can possibly make. Every cliche is in there, every horrible character, all of the uninteresting things that happen. The dialogue is so bad. The movie starts out with these teenagers just talking about death and darkness, and the dialogue is just super creepy, and then you find out that's just their everyday conversations. This is how these kids talk, and not just that, but just the conversations are so awkward because there are these weird pauses between dialogue where the kids just stand there, and they're not even that interesting, and the movie doesn't even focus that much on Slenderman. When he's on screen, it's horrible CGI. There is one scene where they use practical effects. I'm like, huh, that's impressive, but that was really the only thing in the movie that didn't just frustrate the living. Overall, I'll compare Slenderman to plunging a toilet. The experience is terrible, and once it's over, you're like, wow, I didn't get that at all. And And last but not least, I come to my least favorite film of the year. Not saying it's technically the worst, or it is absolutely the worst film made in 2018. No, I'm saying this is my least favorite movie, and it's also a lot of people's least favorite movies. This is a film that came out of nowhere. I actually watched a little later than everybody else because I was trying to catch up on all of the films I missed in 2018, and I knew that I had to see John Travolta as Gotti. I watched Gotti not expecting it to be the worst film I've seen this year, even though I've heard from countless films, Austin, you have to see Gotti. Gotti will frustrate you because they knew me. They knew what I like getting from a movie, and they just knew that Gotti would give me everything that I didn't want, and it did give me everything that I didn't want. Let's start out with the horrible makeup on John Travolta when they skip through time, some of the worst that I've seen all year. The dialogue is so cringeworthy. It's awkward. The conversations do not make a bit of sense at times. The way that John Travolta talks, it feels like it's a spoof. Gotti feels like a spoof biopic. I have never seen anything like that before. But here's the thing. The film takes itself completely seriously. I could see how you could watch Gotti and kind of have a fun time with it. Be like, okay, this is so bad that I'm actually entertained by it. But I just can't see myself watching this getting anything out of the relationships, the characters, or even caring what happens to certain characters in the end. I think the funniest thing about Gotti is the fact that they skip all of this time, they put all of this makeup on John Travolta, but instead of doing the same thing to the wife and the son, they just put a pair of glasses on the son and make his hair slightly grayer. And I don't even think they did anything to the wife. They do not look older. They look the exact same. They skipped multiple years. I don't remember how many years because once again, I tried to dump truck this out of my brain. For some reason, there is Pitbull music all throughout this movie. Even a scene that takes place way before Pitbull was a thing. I'm pretty sure they're playing it out of speakers at this convention. And I'm like, wait a second. Did Pitbull exist back then? I was impressed with what they were trying to do, and then I realized it was a movie called Gotti, not Pitbull Time Travels, and then I'm like, wait a second. I'm not impressed. Guys, if you want to see John Travolta, who I don't think is the worst actor, but lately he's just not done anything to impress me. If you want to see him do a terrible impression, if you want to hear some of the worst dialogue and conversations and more uninteresting characters that you have seen and heard all year, please go and seek out Gotti. I'm pretty sure it is free on Amazon Prime. That's the only reason that I watched it. But Gotti, for me, is not clearly because I think some of these films are very close to it, but for me, it is the worst movie that I have seen this year. And I honestly don't love being negative, but this is my top 10 worst video. This is my chance to have a little fun with you guys. Thank you so much for all of your comments, your likes, your subscriptions. You guys truly are the absolute best. My next ranking will probably be my Netflix shows ranked, where I will be ranking all of the shows I have seen this year, and then my top 10 most anticipated of 2019. You guys are the absolute best, and I'll catch you later.